more rational.
Yes. So, please let me present Professor Uskali Maki from the University of Helsinki. This talk today is Discovery by Interdisciplinarity. So, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for organizing the event and for inviting me. It's been great. That's fun. I've learned a lot. Very inspiring, very instructive. Now, being the last speaker, you would of course expect this to be the climax. But I'm afraid I can't promise anything. It's going to be broad. I mean, some extension or expansion relative to the topics that have been covered thus far. So maybe nothing vertical, but something horizontal will take place. All right, now interdisciplinarity, I mean, this has not been, I think, mentioned, at least not many times, this very term, this workshop thus far, but I think it's extremely important for contemporary science also, and in the future it's going to be even more important. And see, there is this ideology emerging and getting stronger and stronger of thinking of interdisciplinarity as something, you know, extremely powerful, extremely supportable and advisable, recommendable, and all that. The whole science funding regime is under change. The system of science will be very different in a decade or two, and interdisciplinarity is playing a very important role in this major change. So philosophers of science had better, you know, follow these developments and adjust their own interests and focus their research in such a way that they have something interesting to say about these developments. See, if you look at the various mission statements by funding agencies and science policymakers and the rest of it, what you find is a very blind conviction that interdisciplinarity is so important that we should promote it at any price, at all costs, etc. You find these mission statements everywhere by these agencies, but also by universities and so forth. And interdisciplinarity is supposed to be so advisable and recommendable and supportable because it promotes novelty and discovery. I mean, these are what you find in those statements. Novelty and discovery on the one hand and practical relevance on the other. Of course, these go together in that, especially the latter, practical relevance, is supposed to be part of this new accountability, the societal and economic accountability of science. Society invests its resources to science, and in return there should be something useful for society and all that. And this is increasing, this efficiency of these funding decisions in these terms increasingly being measured. And interdisciplinarity is supposed to be good for this increased efficiency that is expected from science. So there we have, I mean, this is just one example of many of its kind. NSF has long recognized the value of interdisciplinary research in pushing fields forward and accelerating scientific discovery. Okay. Now, my own background is, I've done quite a bit of this, on this for many years already. When I returned to Finland in 2006, we started this TINT endeavor. TINT is an acronym for Trends and Tensions in Intellectual Integration. So it deals with the issues of interdisciplinarity. And now we are Center of Excellence. This is as we have about, depending on whether you include PhD students in the number, 30 to 40 people. And it's the biggest in the world in its field. And on philosophy of interdisciplinarity, the pursuit of philosophy of interdisciplinarity is on our agenda. And we have already published several special issues in journals such as Philosophy, Biology and Philosophy, Perspectives on Science, Studies in History and Philosophy of Science, International Studies in Philosophy of Science, European Journal Philosophy of Science, and there's more coming. So if you're interested, you can check our website for these activities and for these publications. We have organized a number of workshops on interdisciplinarity. Okay, so now something about interdisciplinarity and how it implies an expansion or extension of our perspectives on science. Now, it's a matter of institutions. This is the way of bringing in institutions, academic and maybe other institutions as well, to the picture that philosophy of science should be busy with developing. And the obvious reason is that disciplines themselves are institutional entities. I mean, they are social in nature. They are made of various kinds of rules and conventions and established practices and norm structures and what have you. And all of those are social matters. So this requires the incorporation of some social scientific concepts, if you wish, in the artillery of philosophy of science in order to understand how scientific disciplines function and what consequences for the cognitive side of science, this institutional sides in science might have. So therefore, if disciplines are institutional entities, interdisciplinarity is a matter of institutional dynamics. Interdisciplinarity is, I have a very, very generic, very abstract, very general and thin definition of interdisciplinarity. It's really a matter of contact or whatever. Actually, whatever relationship there is between disciplines, that's a matter of interdisciplinarity, and then you soon find that there is hardly any limit to the variety of ways in which disciplines may be related to one another. So it's not possible to provide one succinct, simple definition of interdisciplinarity. But what's sure is that institutions are involved and institutional dynamics are involved in one way or another. Okay. Now, then bringing in the idea of discovery. The idea of discovery by interdisciplinarity, call it DID, may escape the radar of philosophy of science for a variety of reasons, and we know some of those reasons already. We have the good old distinction between justification and discovery and justification. Philosophy of science only dealing with justifications, and discovery would be within the purview of other disciplinary endeavors like psychology, history, sociology, what have you. But of course we now know that discovery is a proper subject for philosophy of science as well. And we also know that it's not an easy distinction to draw. It's not a sharp distinction at all. There are often sort of justificatory ingredients involved in discovery already from the very start. And this also has some there are obvious examples that can be drawn from looking at discovery in an interdisciplinary context. When interdisciplinarity is part of this discovery process, there is often these ingredients of justification involved, as some of my illustrations will show. Another reason why DID may escape the radar of philosophy of science, of course, is this division between the social and the epistemic. Okay, the good old idea was that philosophy of science would only deal with epistemic issues, while the social would be the purview of sociology of science and so forth. But now, of course, we already have fields within philosophy such as social epistemology and all that. It's just okay, and social ontology and so forth. The philosophers are busy with developing, so it's just okay to look at the social side of science also by philosophers of science. So these two things mean that that looking at discovery by interdisciplinarity is a legitimate subject for philosophy of science. So the time is right for that, and the time is not right for that only because these internal developments within philosophy of science. Philosophy of science has sort of enlarged its resources and its scope by now dealing with both discovery and the social side of science, but also ripe for the reason that I mentioned in the very beginning, that science itself is under major change. Interdisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity imposed top-down by these funding agencies and science policymakers, etc., is a major reality in current and future science. Now, of course, the idea discovery by interdisciplinarity is a very inviting subject also for the study from other disciplinary perspectives such as sociology, psychology, economics, what have you. And this of course gives rise to a higher order demarcation issue. I mean, what exactly is the philosophical perspective? How does one distinguish the philosophical perspective to these phenomena from these other disciplinary perspectives? Again, my preference is for a higher order interdisciplinary take on discovery by interdisciplinarity. I think philosophy of science would be rather weak and helpless, somewhat helpless in dealing with these issues without any help from these other disciplinary perspectives such as sociology, psychology, and the rest of it. Okay, then very briefly, something that we can find when we look at research on scientific discovery, especially major discovery, as they often want to put it, not from philosophical or philosophy of science perspective, but from the sociological and psychological, etc. perspectives, maybe cognitive science perspective. For instance, this is what we often found, this idea. I mean, doesn't even require any sort of scholarly expertise. You already know this. That, and actually every practitioner, almost in any scientific discipline, knows it, that major discoveries are often made at the boundaries of discipline. Okay. Then there is this study, or a series of studies that Rogers Hollingsworth has been conducting for many years. It's a very massive study. He has kept reporting bits and pieces of it here and there. One of the ideas there is that individuals who are in possession of what he calls high cognitive complexity facilitates major discovery. And high cognitive complexity is promoted by multicultural experiences and competencies. Now, multicultural here has multiple meanings, such as disciplinary cultures. I mean, the most inventive researchers often share an understanding and maybe membership in different disciplinary cultures, not just one. If you're stuck to one disciplinary culture, if you're educated in one discipline only, and you're loyal just to that, the conventions of that disciplinary culture, you are going to be less inventive than if you feel at home in several disciplinary cultures. But also, it's okay or good for scientific discovery, major discovery, if you're at home in both scientific and non-scientific cultures, if you have some non-scientific activities that you're good at, you really cultivate them seriously and so forth. Also societal cultures, it's good for you to sort of be a citizen of the world, to wander around, get familiar with different larger societal cultures, and that also increases your cognitive complexity and makes you a better inventor of new ideas. Hollingsworth has gone through hundreds and maybe thousands of great scientific inventors and found exactly these kinds of characteristics in a great majority of them. Also, it's fine to be an outsider. An outsider status often helps. If you're in the middle of things, then you're blinded. But if you're a bit outside, removed from the center, maybe you're marginalized actively or something like that, then you start seeing things clearly. You see what's wrong here, or what opportunities for major discovery there are, and so forth. So, and all of this, of course, also relates to interdisciplinarity, because if you're an interdisciplinarian yourself, or you're prone to cross-disciplinary boundaries, then your vision is more clear regarding the opportunities of discovery here or there, compared to the case where you would be just at the center of activity, disciplinary activities in one discipline only. Okay. Now, as I said, interdisciplinarity means a huge variety of different kinds of things. Disciplines can be related to one another in so many different ways. Here I will be focusing on what I call interdisciplinary transfer. The idea of an idea sort of being transferred from one discipline to another. And of course it would be, an idea might have been discovered in discipline A, and when it's transferred to discipline B, then it's kind of discovery within discipline D. It's a novelty. And then the question is, what kind of novelty? Is it sort of a welcome novelty? How easily does the transfer take place? By what pathways? And things like that. What consequences for, say, scientific progress and growth of knowledge, what have you, this might have, etc., etc. So here we may start by making some simple conceptual distinctions, where we can talk about transferables, things that are being or could be transferred from one discipline to another, like concepts, models or model templates. Model templates are sort of abstract versions of models that are emptied from their disciplinary content. Explanatory schemata, techniques, data, styles of inquiry, standards of research quality, statuses, like academic statuses and things like that, and on you go. I mean, there's so many things that can be transferred from. And all of these, as you see, some of them are sort of cognitive tools. Some others already are matters of institutional qualities, like statuses, obviously. And then there are different mechanisms of transfer, pathways through which transfer takes place. It might be just a matter of inspiration. Might be a matter of importation. I mean, researchers in discipline B might be active in importing ideas from other disciplines. And this is a characteristic of some disciplines. There's an ongoing importation of ideas. And novelty is a matter of who first imports a fancy new idea from a neighboring discipline to your own discipline. And then the guy is rewarded for that act of importation. Some other disciplines are active in exportation, and again, successful acts of exportation are rewarded within the exporting discipline. It's a matter of kind of conquering ever new domains and then being good at being rewarded for that accomplishment. There might be situations of collaboration across disciplinary boundaries, and through that collaboration, transferables and transfers across disciplinary boundaries. The outcomes of this transfer may vary from there just being a new metaphor in the recipient discipline, nothing extremely serious, but possibly very, very fruitful. It may be just for communicational or rhetorical purposes, or maybe something more serious. There might be a new theory developing a new explanation of the phenomena that this recipient discipline had the custom of explaining in the past. Might be a matter of confirming a theory in the recipient discipline, or maybe disconfirming a theory in the recipient discipline, say. Might be a matter of theoretical support, either imported, or theoretical criticism that would take place, or data. If data is being transferred, the data might either support or not fail to support theories in the recipient discipline. One obvious outcome that also sort of celebrated greatly, of course, is unification. These theories, or they might be a matter of unifying phenomena that these two disciplines are dealing with one another under one theory that emerges when this transfer takes place. Or it might be a matter of unifying the theories themselves, in one bigger and perhaps more general theory, and so forth. And all sorts of other outcomes might follow. Among the philosophical issues that we might want to pay attention here, of course, are explanatory issues, and again, it's not only a philosophical issue. Other disciplinary perspectives also might be needed. We may ask why this transferable, maybe rather than that, by that pathway rather than some other pathway, with these outcomes rather than some other outcomes happen. And indeed, some of my illustrations deal with just this kind of question. And then there might be normative questions asked. Does the transfer promote some scientific desideratum? I mean, whatever we think of, or practicing scientists think of as a worthwhile goal of their inquiries, such as discovering new facts about the world, or discovering new ranges of unity in the world, or discovering new properties of their theories, and so forth. And then, of course, how to facilitate desirable transfers. And of course, this last question is something that will be of much interest to those funding agencies and science policymakers, so forth. They are the ones who powerfully contribute to the design of academic institutions and allocating resources between different lines of research. And because they want novelty and relevance, they want to fund and support those arrangements in science that facilitate desirable transfers. Okay, something about the conditions of interdisciplinary transfer. If you think of the instigation stage, how it all starts, takes off, etc. There's something that, I mean, many people are aware of these things, rankings of disciplines. It's nothing official, and etc. But it's kind of implicit understanding that not all disciplines are equal. I mean, there's a ranking, there's a pecking order, something like that, in terms of prestige, in their performance, also in their social status, their academic status, also regarding the confidence that the practitioners in various disciplines think of themselves and their capabilities and so forth, because that has consequences for whether they are willing to, say, conquer other domains and also the way they deal with other disciplinarians, etc. So that is something to be kept in mind, because it does have consequences for discovery by interdisciplinarity. Then some properties of the recipient discipline. Often when an interdisciplinary transfer is taking place, or is about to take place, or considered as desirable to take place, there is a recognized need in the recipient discipline. We need something and we don't have that ourselves. So let's take it from, let's have it from somewhere else. Say archaeology. I mean, archaeology is a wonderful case of a sort of inherently interdisciplinary discipline, and it keeps consulting other disciplines all the time. So it doesn't have all those resources itself. So there is this recognized need for services by other disciplines, from physics to chemistry, all the way to humanities and so forth. Then there's often a recognized deficiency in the discipline, and that also makes this discipline, inclined to welcome influences from other disciplines. So think of political science and neuroscience; they are among those. There's often a complaint within these disciplines that we don't have a proper theory, or we don't have enough unity in our discipline, etc. So they look for help in other disciplines, and actually in both cases economics has been the servicing discipline, providing strong theory for those disciplines. Okay. Then, among the relevant properties of the provider discipline, it might have the provider discipline might have the capacity to serve as an facilitator, as an auxiliary servant of some other disciplines, or it might have as kind of, maybe because of its excessive academic self-confidence or whatever, it might have an expansive drive, conquering ever new domains, trying to explain ever new kinds of phenomena in terms of its own great theory, and so forth. Here are a couple of examples of these kinds of cases. Law and economics. I mean, legal studies and economics are related to one another in two ways. I mean, it's often, both of them are often called by this term law and economics, but actually there are two extremely different kinds of ways in which law and economics can be related to one another. Law and economics proper is a matter of economics when explaining economic phenomena proper, finding itself sort of not sufficiently capable of explaining all relevant aspects of those phenomena, and therefore calling for law for help. Okay, let's see how legal phenomena, legal institutions and rules and those kinds of things make an impact on economic phenomena. And so next to the ordinary costs and benefits and prices and so forth, let's also include legal phenomena in the set of explanation in those economic explanations. So it's a matter of expanding the range of explanation in this case by consulting law for help in economics. Whereas the economic analysis of law is something very different indeed. It's a matter of using economics for explaining legal phenomena. So, and this is the expansive drive of economics. Economics is among those disciplines that have this sort of expansive or imperialistic drive. It keeps expanding itself, the domains of phenomena that it feels like being capable of explaining. And economic analysis of law is one such example. So here, the idea is not to sort of extend the set of exponentia, but rather the set of exponenda beyond the traditionally those phenomena that traditionally were conceived as economic phenomena. Also legal phenomena, legislation, crime and punishment, those phenomena that used to be studied by legal studies and maybe criminology and so forth. Now economics starts explaining those phenomena as well. So that's something quite different. But anyway, it's due to this property of the provider discipline its confidence, its powerful theory that it has in its possession that seem to be at least apparently capable of explaining so many different kinds of phenomena. Then the outcome, so that's so much for the instigation of these transfers, but the outcomes, the results of these transfers, it might be, those outcomes are here maybe the idea of constraint could be invoked. The certain properties of the recipient discipline have consequences for what shape the outcome will take. And those include the stringency and uniformity of those constraints imposed by the disciplinary conventions in the recipient discipline. I mean, disciplines differ from one another regarding the stringency and uniformity of their disciplinary conventions. Some disciplines are very, very permissive. They're internally not very rigorously organized, etc. They don't have a uniform internal structure and discipline. I'm using the term in another sense. While others are extremely unified, internally very uniform, gatekeeping is very, very tight, and so forth. And these features have consequences for the outcome. So there might be very weak constraints in the recipient discipline, and therefore the accommodation of ideas coming from other disciplines might be very smooth indeed. They are easily accommodated, no problem at all. And here, thinking of sociology, which does not have a unified internal structure, it's very loose in its boundaries. It's not clear what exactly is sociology and what not, etc. And therefore, this thing called rational choice sociology, which is again, it's an achievement in economics imperialism. Some sociologists do sociology using economic ideas of rational choice in the market. There's been no, of course, there's a lot of quarrel and debate and all that within sociology, whether rational choice sociology is a good thing after all, advisable and permissible and so forth, whether it's proper sociology and those kinds of things. But nevertheless, there's been no big problem in rational choice sociology of finding a niche within sociology itself. So there are those who are specialized in doing sociology in the rational choice mode, and with no big problem. Whereas if the constraints are very, very strong and severe, very constraining, then the accommodation is very selective. And behavioral economics is, economics is one of these disciplines with very strong constraint. It's a clear boundary, and economists are always very, very, very outspoken about what's economics and what's not economics, etc. And the internal uniformity and unity is very strong indeed, and therefore the intrusion of psychology into economics. This is what has been taking place in the past several years. Of course, Daniel Kahneman was awarded the Nobel Prize psychologist. Of course, Herbert Simon is another in the distant past, but nevertheless, the reason why Kahneman, rather than some other psychologists, got this honor is because behavioral economics in his style is possible to accommodate in the main theoretical body of economics, while some others are not, and those others are not even considered for importation, for letting them in to the discipline of economics. I might have something more to say about this if I have the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Another consideration has to do with whether these ideas, these transferables, are exported or imported. This makes a difference for the driving motives of those exporters and importance and also for the shape of the outcomes. If you think of exportation, the driving motive of the exporters is often the idea, the wish to conquer new domains of application for their own theories. Okay, I mean this is rewarded achievement. I mean you find new applications for the theory, and those applications do not need to be within the boundaries of your own discipline. You might check whether the theory applies, somewhere else, and so this might be a driving motive. Some of these people might also have the motive of unifying ranges of phenomena, domains of phenomena by this kind of interdisciplinary expansion. The outcome, regarding the outcome, here those outcomes are ruled by the conventions of the provider discipline, because the activity is taken care of by the provider members or practitioners within the provider discipline. So the conventions of the provider discipline rule shape the outcome. Importation, on the other hand, is something different. Here the driving motive often is one of wanting to solve a domestic problem in your own discipline. As I mentioned a while ago, I mean, this is often the case. You have a deficiency or a need in your own discipline, and therefore for a problem you want to solve, and you don't have the resources for solving that problem within your own discipline. So let's check if those resources are available elsewhere. And here the outcome is ruled by or shaped by the conventions of the recipient rather than the provider discipline. Now about economics. I realize that time is running. There's a bit of humor here in this phrase. So economic discovery, as I see it, is at least some of it is governed by inference to the best possible explanation. Now, what I mean by possible explanation is how possible explanation. Much of economic explanation is a matter of providing the how possibly explanation. And then the best how possible explanation, of course, it's the best because economics is the best. I mean, economics, this has been sociologically studied, that there is this sense of superiority amongst the economics professionals. They really think of them far above all of the other social sciences, and sometimes they are superior to some non-social sciences as well. Okay, now what's the content of that how possibly explanation that's the best? It's explanation in terms of rational choice in the market, to put it very, very briefly, simply, and succinctly. So here the way it proceeds is that first there's an observation of a pattern, phenomena that might be regularity, rough regularity or something like that. And then the theoretical accomplishment is to show that the description of that pattern is derivable from rational choice in a market. So you need to, of course, conceptualize the situation such that you can apply this notion of rational choice in the market to that case. Then you show that the description of the pattern can be derived from that theoretical idea of rational choice in the market. And here, two ideas of discovery. There are many more, of course, but here I will be focusing on only two. Derivability, we can discover derivability. So this or that description of this or that pattern can be derived from rational choice. It's a major achievement. It's a discovery, as it were. This derivability of that pattern from my theory. And the second idea of discovery is the discovery of should be ontic unity. So, and this is very, very important for this interdisciplinary expansions, say if you use your theory for explaining not just the phenomena in your traditional domain of phenomena, but also phenomena that used to belong to the domains of other disciplines, what exactly are you doing? You might only discover the derivability of those further phenomena in those neighboring domains, but you might also discover ontic unity between your traditional phenomena and those phenomena in those neighboring domains. They are of the same kind, and that's a major discovery, of course. Okay, I mean, there are, both of these have intradisciplinary and interdisciplinary versions. Maybe I say a few things about these, or these illustrations about interdisciplinary accomplishments or discoveries. Say religious phenomena and religious behavior and criminal behavior. These are among the conquests of economics imperialism, if you wish, explaining religious phenomena as rational choice in a market, okay? Maximizing behavior in the market. So they have conceptualized religions and religious phenomena in terms of the market. There are religious markets, there are churches competing with one another for customers and providing services, and then those customers, those would-be believers, they go to the religious markets and then they buy these religious services and well, it's serious business. This is really so the question is, is this it's just a matter of discovery as derivability of these phenomena from economic theory, or is this a discovery of ontic unity? Is religious behavior similar to, sufficiently similar to, sort of traditionally conceived economic behavior, such that they constitute the unity, etc. Criminal behavior, similarly, we are all potential criminals. I mean, norms, social norms, morality plays no role in the world of economics. So all of us actually calculate simply the costs and benefits of either abiding to the law or commit a crime. And we just, if the costs are higher in either case than the benefits, and we don't do that kind of thing. But if the benefits are higher than the cost, then we do it. So regardless of whether it's regarded as a crime or not a crime, etc. Again, I mean, is this a matter of just being able to derive those phenomena from economic theory, or have we actually discovered the unity in human behavior, both criminal and non-criminal behavior, and so forth? So these are the issues I want to. I see that time is running so fast that I might actually simply skip this illustration of. Because I want to get to one of my favorite examples, and that has to do with this issue of discovering ontic unity. So I've myself done quite a bit of work on this idea of scientific imperialism, and of course in that context we may talk about imperialistic discovery. And of course this is metaphoric talk, but it's also thinking of the literal meanings of the notion of imperialism and imperialistic discovery. I mean, there's a nice correspondence here between the literal and the non-literal. So this is a new field of a new topic for philosophy of science. I'm just giving some references here. There's a lot more coming right now. We are doing we organized a major workshop in Helsinki at TINT, and we have some 20 papers to go for an edited volume on this. So I would expect this to be on the agenda of philosophy of science already by now. Okay. Now maybe how am I doing with time? I'm a bit confused.
Yep.
5-10 minutes.
5-10 minutes, okay. Then I'll get just very quickly this, and then I'll go to my favorite illustration of biological markets. So here we have the idea of mere explanatory expansionism. So on top we have disciplines, and below we have domains of phenomena. So we have a discipline, then it's sort of a traditional favorite domain of phenomena that it deals with, explains, etc. And then there is an explanatory expansionism, another domain of phenomena is being explained in terms of that same discipline. But there is no other discipline sort of claiming that blue domain as its own. So this is not imperialistic at all, just expansion. But here we do have another blue discipline claiming the blue domain as its own, as it were, belonging to it in a sense. And then we might have just what I call domain-only imperialism, when this red disciplines only seeks to explain those blue phenomena without any intrusion into the practices of the blue discipline. And then we have what I call disciplinary imperialism, when there is an intrusion into the standards and conventions and practices, what have you, of the blue discipline. But I consider both as versions of imperialism. Okay, so I'll just skip this. Also, well, colonialism would be just a small-scale imperialism, as it were. It's a matter of establishing colonies in the disciplinary structure of another discipline. So this is how it often goes. So the red discipline establishes a colony in the blue discipline, like rational choice sociology, like behavioral economics, within economics, and what have you. And it might be a matter of exportation from red to blue, or importation. Actually, the blue disciplinarians might simply import those ideas from the red discipline. That's all. Okay. Then the important distinction here, already alluded to it, is about these discoverables. I mean, there are many kinds of them, but here I'm only focusing on two: ontic unity discovered, the derivability of certain descriptions of certain phenomena being discovered. See, ontological unification, as I call it, would be a matter of unifying apparently diverse phenomena by showing that they are of the same kind after all, even though they don't appear or did not appear to be of the same kind. They can be made of the same stuff or caused by the same causes or mechanisms. So this is a matter of discovery of ontic unity in the world. And here are just some examples that economics imperialists might claim as having discovered. All these kinds of things, from buying stocks to becoming addicted to a trap, would be, similarly caused, etc. And then the contrast is with derivational unification, and this would be a matter of deriving a maximum number of exponandum sentences from a minimum number of exponent sentences or explanatory schemes. There's of course a wide literature on unification in the philosophy of science, and much of it only deals with what I call derivational unification. And so here, the derivability from those sentences or those schemes is being discovered. And then we might have mere derivational unification without any ontological unification. And that would be a weaker accomplishment, of course. And some would say dubious. Depends on our philosophical preferences. The realist would say, as I am, that mere derivational unification is not enough. We need ontological unification to be happy. Okay. Then the idea of biological markets. So this is a new approach that started in biology and primatology in the early 1990s. So here the idea is that certain classes of non-human animal interactions, actually it has been extended to bacteria even more recently, but so bacteria interactions would be included here, They are named and modeled as market exchange. And the primitive concepts of these models would include things such as commodity. And here I'm using, I think, mainly the case of baboon communities. They have been the paradigm application of these models. So commodities would include infant holding of a baboon baby, sex between individual baboons and so forth, currency, grooming. This is what I want to say about that. Supply and demand of these commodities and currencies, trade and exchange, like grooming exchange for sex, grooming exchange for infant holding, grooming exchange for food or protection, and so forth. And then there is a price, that is amount of grooming, measured in terms of time. Competition between different potential groomers and sex partners, what have you. Advertising, and here this comes from another animal species. The peacock tail would be a signaling advertisement vehicle. Investments in sort of permanent relations between these animal individuals and so forth. It's a very fancy field, very confusing, very amusing, but at the end not that innocent after all. I'll say more about that. So Hamilton's and Travers were in the background, and then these guys, Ronald Noe being the main architect of it all. Somebody with whom I know very well personally, and I've been in constant communication. He's also coming to Helsinki every now and then. We have this ongoing workshop on the market and marketization, a multidisciplinary workshop, and he's the biologist there. So in the early 1990s it all started, and it's really very visible and prominent. It sort of has this quality of being science. It's published in the West place. Okay. Now here I will not go through this. I just make the point that this is a case of conceptual marketization. Of course, in the real world we have this real world marketization going on. The whole world is being marketized at the moment. This is one of the mega trends, cultural mega trends of our time. But also in our concepts, in our ways of speaking of the world, there is this conceptual marketization going on. We increasingly adopt market terminology for speaking about various parts of the world. And some of these are reflexive, some are non-reflexive. But I will not go into that now. So my question is, what, if any, kind of interdisciplinary discovery is involved in the notion and study of biological markets? It's a matter of discovering derivability, discovering ontic unity, or maybe something else. Okay. What I expected when I started working on this was that it's a matter of a cross-disciplinary downward intellectual imperialism from economics to biology. Downward in the sense of, here we have social science making an intrusion into a natural science. But I then left open the issue of derivability versus unity and those kinds of things. So I thought that maybe my work on scientific imperialism would nicely fit here. But this did not quite become fulfilled, this expectation, at least not completely. Something else seemed to be going on, something looser, something less structured and obvious. So here we have at least a case of intradisciplinary unification in the study of biological markets, intradisciplinary and interfield unification within biology, between the fields of sexual selection in one field. Here we have the idea of mating markets, intraspecific cooperation, as they call it. For instance, baboon grooming would be intraspecific cooperation, and then what they call interspecific mutualism. Cleaner fish would be an example. So here we have a big fish, and then we have a lot of small fish. The small fish clean the big fish, and in exchange of this service, there's a market here. In exchange of this service, they get receive nutrients and protection, etc. So it's a good deal for both parties. Noe and Hammerstein argue that there are obvious analogies between these fields, and that these analogies are captured by biological markets. Market mechanism is their common evolutionary mechanism, as they put it. But this is the key question. Is there an interdisciplinary unification going on here? Is it an interdisciplinary economics-based unification in terms of some distinctively economic theory of the market? So in economics, we would have an economic theory of the market, and this theory would be transferred to bear upon biological phenomena or animal behavior. Is this what's going on here? This is my question. What's interesting is that there are hardly any references to economics literature. So these biologists have not studied any economic literature. They know a little bit about game theory and so forth, but they haven't studied the huge literature on markets in economics. But yet they claim that there has been a flow of ideas from economics to biology. This is from even 2005. The analogy between rational decision making and adaptation by natural selection generated the first wave of ideas flowing from the field of economics to that of biology. This is, I'm not sure if they want to defend that idea in any literal sense. And also, there are no claims of economics-based unification of economic and biological phenomena being made by anybody here. So if you contrast here would be to the aspirations of economists, such as Gary Becker and others, who do claim that they have actually accomplished a unification of traditionally economic phenomena and some new phenomena like criminal behavior, discrimination behavior, addiction, drug addiction and religious behavior and so forth. But here there is no such claim being made, and I think the reason for that is that these are biologists. Economists have not been busy with this study of biological markets. They are biologists. So it's not that economics has been active in imperializing biological domains or the discipline of biology. It's rather biologists themselves who have started using economic concepts for building models of biological phenomena. But this is the question to ask. I mean, now I'm interested in the question whether there is ontic unity achieved here. Are biological markets proper markets? And proper markets would be markets as conceived by economics. I'm not sure economists are always that great in understanding proper markets either, but maybe for the argument here that can be assumed. So, is there a discovery of ontic unity here? Okay, I think I'll just skip this for the sake of time. Also skip this. I can come back to these details if you want. Simply listing some dissimilarities would be illuminating. They themselves are actually aware of many of these dissimilarities. For example, this is one example. Unlike trade in contemporary human market economies, animal trade is not subject to enforceable contracts. Now, markets in the human world are indeed, they involve contracting, and that's, you know, they're subject to the contract law and things like that. And so the very idea of contract is very, very important for human markets, but there are no contracts in the animal kingdom. So that's one obvious dissimilarity. This is an interesting claim. Contrary to the expectation of traditional neoclassical economics, biological markets will frequently not clear. So, but this is a very funny claim to make, because of course those economic markets clear, which means that supply and demand meet one another. So everything that is supplied will be also bought and so forth. So there's no oversupply or over demand. And that's what it means for markets to clear. And then saying that there's a difference here because these biological markets do not clear, frequently do not clear. But the comparison here is not between economic markets and biological markets, it's rather textbook models of economic markets, where markets clear, and then biological markets out there in the world. So it's really, really funny. Anyway, but there are other interesting and important things going on here. Grooming is not a currency. I mean, they think, they have always thought grooming is a currency. Grooming in exchange for all those other things, like sex, infant holding, food and protection, and the rest of it. The recipient of grooming does not get in possession of some currency that she could then use for purchasing commodities from third parties. This is, of course, in the nature of the currency or money. I mean, we get it. We sell something, we get money in return, and then we can use the money for purchasing something else. But if we are just groomed, there's nothing left here there that we could then hand over for some other things in the market. So indeed, grooming does not seem to be a currency proper. Then also in biological markets, property rights are not transferred. This is in the nature of human markets. I mean, anybody in possession of a commodity, for instance, has property rights over that commodity, and when it's exchanged for something else, another commodity or for money, then the property rights over that commodity are transferred to the other party. This is not what happens in biological markets. And this is my own complaint. Grooming. So this is what happens in those markets. Grooming. I mean, it might also be inbred, but just consider grooming is exchanged for instance, infant holding, or grooming is exchanged for sex. And then the question is this really market exchange? And my point here is that couldn't grooming and these embraces and sex be appreciated by both parties simultaneously? Here actually it seems that consider sex. I mean, couldn't both parties enjoy it possibly? Or does one just groom, the male baboon grooms the lady baboon, and the lady baboon only enjoys the grooming, and in exchange of grooming provides a sex service? It's like considering sex as prostitution or something like that. And I find it very, very odd. Anyway, so and then I'll skip this.
Yeah.
This is the final slide. Biological agents are gendered and socially ranked. In the biological markets literature, indeed, this idea appears, and this is not an important importation from economics at all. So they are gendered, and this should be a delight to feminist economists, because in economics there is no gender in standard economic theory. So, for instance, in male to female grooming, I mean, it's indeed matters whether there are males and females, and then it's a matter of sex. Also, it might be a matter of a female grooming a male for protection and for food. If a female grooms a female mother of an infant baboon, then in exchange she will get the right to hold the groomee's infant, etc. So gender does make a difference here, plays a very crucial role. They are also socially ranked, and this might be a delight to economic sociologists. if you're a high status groomer in the community, you need to use less time for grooming. If you're a low status groomer, you need to groom more and more and more in exchange for the same service from the other party. So biologists are unconstrained by the disciplinary conventions of economics here. They have just made their observations. I mean, I don't think they've looked into the literature in feminist social science or economic sociology. They just made their observations about the baboon behavior and drew these conclusions. This I need to show. One still wonders why the label market has been adopted in biological markets, and Noe explained it to me. We have lengthy correspondence on it. Just felt sexy. That's all. I mean, what about economics doesn't play? It's all about sex.
Some minutes.
Few minutes, yeah.
Few minutes for question. Please.
Well, I have lots to say, because as you know, I've thought a lot about interfield relations. The one thing that struck me in the early part of your talk was you were taking the fields as established, and things were being imported and exported and had various relations. You weren't really talking about establishing a complete bridge between the fields, it seemed to me, like our interfield theories were. And you also didn't talk about new interdisciplinary disciplines arising, such as molecular biology did. So I just wondered, are you primarily thinking of fields as in disciplines? Sorry, you're talking about social parts. I'm usually talking about the conceptual parts. But were you thinking of disciplines as established, and your work is really looking at what happens between established disciplines, or you're thinking more fluidly about that?
As I said several times, I think it's an extremely complex and extremely varied phenomenon in interdisciplinarity, and those features that you mentioned are surely among the most prominent ones, and they should be in this picture. I mean, if this picture were broad enough, complete enough, then of course they would be part of it, and they would require different kinds of treatment. So I only focused on the idea of transfer and what conditions that transfer and outcomes the kind of transfer might have. But surely, I mean, those are very, very important phenomena, and I'm very open for just anything that this level of interdisciplinarity can be taken to cover.
And if I could just make one more comment, when we were doing our interfield theories work, we looked at successful ones. We had 3 in that original paper, and I worked on some more. And we were criticized because we didn't look at failures, attempts at devising interfield theories that didn't work. And you seem to be kind of wrestling with the question of whether transfers work or don't work, but you mostly were talking about success issues, it seemed to me. And so I just tell you, your critics may well say, but tell us about some failures also.
I mean, failure, I mean, yeah.
Maybe this was sort of a failure.
This kind of failure, yeah, but then this distinction between discovering derivability and discovering unity also can be used for identifying failures, because depending on one's philosophical outlook, the mere discovery of derivability might be considered failure without any discovery of unity.
Okay, Eddie?
Thanks. I was curious how much work is being done by the inter part of interdisciplinary transfer here, because it seems like there's a lot of cases of intradisciplinary transfer as well, that I'll be working on a problem and I look at something that's clearly in the same field, in the same discipline, just perhaps slightly different phenomena, and I go, oh, that's a great technique, I can port that over. So I guess I'm wondering, do you think that many of the things that you've talked about could apply also within a discipline? Is this sort of maybe, in some sense, a general account of transfer in scientific endeavors? Or do you think that there's something particularly distinctive to the interdisciplinary part?
I think it surely is applicable throughout. It's just that these institutional entities, I mean, because even though we define a discipline as an institutional structure, the fields within the disciplines also are institutional structures. And then there's a lot of variety in the way in which these are constituted. It might sometimes be that an interdisciplinary field is very much like some other discipline. And also differences are maybe huge. And it's about how these disciplines and fields are organized, the tightness of their organization, the tightness of their boundaries being guarded, and the degree of their internal unity, uniformity, and things of that kind. And that varies. Those attributes vary greatly between both disciplines and fields within disciplines. So this has no limits to its applicability, insofar as there is a combination of these institutional structures and cognitive structures.
Okay, Professor Gibbs, the last question. Yes, well, you began by saying that all these funding bodies are very keen on interdisciplinarity and so on. And, but I don't think it follows from that it's necessarily a good thing, because funding bodies often get it completely wrong. Now, my personal view was I was sympathetic to the idea of interdisciplinarity, but I made a sort of rough attempt to test how often it occurs that interdisciplinarity leads to great creative advances. So my feeling, and maybe your group has got, I mean, I've only done this roughly, so maybe your group has reached different conclusions, but if you look at the natural sciences and medicine, but not the social sciences, I have to consider those, it seems the conclusion I reached is that yes, it does occur. There are striking examples. The best one I came across was the origin of the germ theory of disease, which occurred with an interdisciplinary collaboration between Pasteur, who was a chemist, and Lister, who was a surgeon, and that was very important. But these situations, my feeling is that they're relatively rare. Now, what is true is what you gave the results of Roger, somebody who found that people who are creative have different disciplines. But that doesn't necessarily mean that their science is done in an interdisciplinary fashion. For example, Newton was interested in both physics, mathematics, well, physics and mathematics, same thing essentially at that time, and also biblical criticism. So I can see that if you have different interests, this may improve your mind. But if you look at how Newton discovered his thing, there was no interdisciplinarity. I mean, he was just studying standard maths and physics, which were essentially the same at the time, and he came up with his results. And another example would be Einstein, 1905. Now, he is certainly, what was the other one, the marginalized outsider. Nobody would give him a job. But actually, if you see what he was studying, it really just was the standard problems of the theoretical physics of that day, in all his early papers. So really my question is, I mean, I'm not necessarily hostile to the project, because there definitely are examples of interdisciplinarity leading to creative advance, but I'm just a bit worried how common they are in history of science. So do you have any comment on that, what your group has done?
This is an empirical question, and it's always,
yes,
extremely dangerous to draw these generalizations about the history of science. Or there's so much science out there. We don't have data of all of it. Contemporary science or past science. And in the history of science, it covers just a tiny fraction of all that there has been. So it's very daring to draw generalizations on it. But I think it's sufficient for there to be at least some of this for it to be taken seriously by, say, funding agencies and all that. And in any case, they seem to be confident that this is where the future of science lies, and that's the way of making science, worthwhile, useful for society, and capable of solving our own wicked problems and all that.
Yes, but I think funding agencies may have got it completely wrong. I mean, they've also introduced all these things like the research assessment exercises, and my view is that that makes performance worse. So maybe it is good to have a little bit of interdisciplinarity, but maybe concentrating too much on that is also
I fully agree. I think my suspicion is that they are overdoing it. They're overdoing it, and that's exactly why philosophers of science should be keen on studying interdisciplinarity. To be capable of, having a reasonable and critical communication with these agencies, who don't understand these phenomena themselves at all.
We have to stop. So thank you again. I will also thank Emiliano for having organized.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.